Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday. We made it to Friday. The Gateway to Chaos. Friday, September 26th, 2025. Time for yet another show. And golly, there's a lot to check in on today. And I think we're going to have to do our best to hybridize the deep dive thing and the lightning round thing. And I think it's going to be heavy on the lightning round. So we may not be able to get deep into a lot of the details of what's going on, although some of it really demands it. But I have a feeling some of these things we'll be talking about for a very long time. All right, well, let's see. There was something that happened yesterday that I said, oh, good, I'm glad we covered this thing, and then oh, well, I can't remember what it was, and it doesn't matter. We'll get around to it eventually, I'm sure. I don't really have any idea of where to start. I guess we'll start with the news that they did, in fact, manage to get an indictment for James Comey yesterday. We were in a similar situation with the Comey charging that we were in with, their adventures in attempting to indict Letitia James and Lisa Cook and I guess Adam Schiff too. They're still working on, although we haven't seen them try their hand at actually getting the indictment. We just watched their case fall apart. So Comey was at a different stage. Their case was never any good, and it should have fallen apart. We were at the stage where the U.S. attorney was considering whether or not to go forward and really convene a grand jury and ask them to indict, and just thought, we just don't even have the evidence to really do it. There's little chance we'd get to a conviction for sure. I mean, certainly in their head somewhere was likely the old saying that we repeat in situations like this all the time, that a half competent prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich, as they say. That's and that's the joke. And then of course people started throwing ham sandwiches. It wasn't ham either, but it should have been ham. That just should have been a symbolic thing, throwing ham sandwiches at people. But we also, at the same time, started to see a lot of the grand jury action in D.C. fail to result in a true bill of indictment. No true bill, as they say, or just no bill. That's the result when the grand jury says, listen, the prosecutor just doesn't have a leg to stand on. It's rare because the threshold for making out your basic case to a grand jury is pretty low. You don't have to actually prove, as you do at trial, that someone is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but just that there's a reasonable chance. They're stating a claim that's an actual violation of law, and there's a reasonable chance that they could actually make a proffer of proof that would stand up to a trial jury's inspection. And that's all that really is required to go forward at that stage. But they were saying in D.C., in a lot of these cases, no. It could be, there's varying theories on the why of it from the grand jury's perspective. There is, of course, the tool, the somewhat questionable legitimacy of the tool of jury nullification. But, that's one of those things that we still leave in the hands of regular people like you and me. If you happen to be picked for a grand jury and you happen to think that the prosecutor is out of his mind, then you can do one of two things. One, if he makes it really easy on you by not presenting any evidence whatsoever and making no case at all against the proposed defendant, I guess, the subject of the indictment that they're seeking, and you just say, well, just legally speaking, you're wrong. And then there's, true, pure jury nullification, which would, I guess, be more a case where they say, you have described the law that is actually on the books, and it looks to me like this person did violate that law, but we hate you very, very much, or think you're terrible, or think you're politically motivated. That's another way it can be done. Or, whatever it is, we don't like the color. It doesn't really matter what the motivation is. A jury can, if they so choose, collectively say, and it's difficult to get enough of them to agree. But so, there has to be a prevailing sentiment, and they say, nah, to hell with everything. You need us to hand this indictment up, and we're just not going to do it for whatever reason. Sometimes a very good reason, sometimes a very bad reason, some mixed. Sometimes one half of the jury has one reason, one half of the jury has the other reason. But if you can get them all on one page to say no, that's a relatively rare thing. And it happened like 7 times in D.C. Jeanine Pirro has been an abject failure at all this. Hooray, thank God. And now over in, on the other side of the river in Alexandria, Virginia, in the Eastern District of Virginia's federal courts, they've been plotting slowly, Plodding, but also plotting with 2 T's in the White House to indict James Comey. And I was saying yesterday, I'm still not even 100% sure I know. I've read an article about it. It still didn't stick with me. What is the crime? In at least one case, the crime that's alleged here is that he lied to Congress during a hearing essentially investigating the investigation of what Trump calls Russiagate, the Russia hoax. And they believe he lied about, they believed he lied about a lot of things. They tried to get him charged with lying about 2 things. The grand jury, by the way, only agreed with 1. They indicted him on 2 counts. There were 3, I think, in total. 2 lying to Congress and 1 some other stupid thing. We'll read an article about it. That we maybe need to get the details on. But they wouldn't go along with everything. So there's mixed results there. And, of course, the events leading up to it. The U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia said, I don't think so. We're not going to do this thing. Although there, I think the calculation was we could probably get a grand jury to indict, maybe. It's a maybe. But we can't get a trial jury to convict. There's just not enough evidence. When we have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, it's going to end up being a waste of time. Let's not do it. And generally, normal Department of Justice procedure, normal local DA procedure is, if you really don't think that this is going to result in a conviction, and really you should be pretty sure that it will, because the odds are stacked in favor of the prosecution in most criminal cases anyway. But part of the reason the odds are stacked that way is they don't typically go after, go ahead with cases that they think they certainly don't usually go after cases that they think they're going to lose. And they very frequently decide not to go forward with cases that they think it's a coin toss. I'm not sure that we're going to win. And then, even then, beyond that, there are places where I think we're going to win, but, we're willing to make a deal. It's a very small percentage of cases where they say, that's it, trial or nothing. We're going to go forward with it. So, that's only if they just don't get any cooperation out of the defendant, who also has a lawyer who can read the cards. Anyway, so James Comey. Yes, let's read you the New York Times on that one. Although, again, I also have, there's about 15 different reports of all these things all over the place, because everybody's talking about some of these big stories. So let's start with the New York Times thing, and we'll be judicious about. I think I say that now, but you'll see how judicious we are with the amount of time we're spending on it, because you start getting into the weeds, and then you realize actually some of this stuff is complicated but important. Grand jury indicts longtime Trump target, former FBI Director James Comey. That's the headline. The move came after the president intensified his pressure campaign on the Justice Department in recent days, publicly demanding that top officials prosecute Mr. Comey. And that was part of the process we were talking about before. The U.S. attorney there in Eastern District said, it's not going to work. We're not going to do it. So the exit of this U.S. attorney was engineered. And then Trump, petty little man that he is, insisted he didn't quit. I fired him first. You can't quit. You're fired. It was like a cartoon. Anyway, then he picked Lindsey Halligan, who, by all accounts is just not really qualified to that job, but I guess puts her in the job in an acting capacity. By the way, the other name of the other woman prosecutor who was at one point, whose name was floated, like, no, he's not really going to go ahead with Lindsey Halligan. He's going to do this other. Yeah, she's the deputy now. Anyway, but basically it was a mini Saturday Night Massacre in the sense that, well, if you don't do this case, we'll just fire you. And we're just going to fire prosecutors until we find somebody who does it. Lindsey Halligan was put in. She's unqualified to the job. She's a real estate lawyer up until one day she decided to put herself in the line of sight of Donald Trump, got her hair done and put herself in the sight line of Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago one day, and he did the thing where, what was it, the movie Grand Canyon, where Steve Martin's producer character drives by some, attractive blonde woman on the movie lot. What's your name? Come to my office. I think I have something for you. Right? So there you go. Real estate lawyer turned personal defense attorney for the president in constitutional law cases. Sure, why not? And then after the election, needed to find some other reason for her to hang around. She got put in charge of the Smithsonian censorship. All right. Anyway, now she's at least acting U.S. attorney in Eastern District of Virginia. She says, I don't care what the odds are. I'll do it. I'll bring the charges. So she's the only one that signed the paperwork. They couldn't get anybody else to sign on to this thing. Nobody wants anything to do with it. But the job's done. There's at least 2 counts in this indictment. So, let's see who's reporting here. Devlin Barrett, Glenn Thrush, Alan Feuer, names you know. James Comey, a name you know also. And by the way, it's tough to get excited about, oh, that's right, James Comey, don't do this to him. He's such a great guy. Everybody remembering at the time that, hey, James Comey, wow, you cost Hillary Clinton the 2016 election with your stupid departure from DOJ policy against all odds, reopening a stupid, baseless political investigation into a candidate for office, which would right now have Donald Trump screaming election interference if it was about him. So it's hard to get too excited about it. But since he's not on trial for that crime, I guess I don't really, can't really root for a conviction on this thing. Instead, he's on trial for, or will be on trial for, something completely different, which shouldn't be a big deal, but, Trump is turning into one, and we're just instinctively saying anything Trump wants to get accomplished, probably a good idea to resist right off the bat. I suppose you could analyze it a little further than that, but you'll be right 99% of the time. Here's the story. A federal grand jury on Thursday indicted James B. Comey, the former FBI director, a culmination of President Trump's relentless demand for retribution after the Bureau investigated his 2016 presidential campaign over possible ties to Russia, which there were. Mr. Comey was indicted on 1 count of making a false statement and 1 count of obstruction of a congressional proceeding in connection with his testimony before a Senate committee in September of 2020. So we'll read further, but right now it sounds like 2 counts that they were able to cobble together out of one incident. The indictment, filed in Alexandria, Virginia, came over the objection of career prosecutors at the EDVA, who found insufficient evidence to support charges, but were overruled by Lindsey Halligan, a Trump loyalist handpicked by the president to run the office a few days ago. It represents the most significant legal step yet by the Trump administration to harry, punish, and humiliate a former official the president identified as an enemy at the expense of procedural safeguards intended to shield the Justice Department from political interference and personal vendettas. What do you know? And by the way, the guy, let's not forget in all of this, Trump fires Comey, wants retribution, has been seeking retribution since then. It's taken him another election to go and do it. But in the meantime, he said, well, fine, I'm going to straighten out this FBI, which is totally corrupt and horrible. Now that I got rid of the totally corrupt, horrible guy, Chris Wray, you're my choice for director of the FBI. And now, of course, he wants to prosecute Chris Wray as well. But, let it not be said that he's got his act together there in the White House. The bare bones 2-page indictment was signed only by Ms. Halligan, a former defense lawyer for Mr. Trump who previously, or rather personally, presented the case to the jury, despite her lack of any previous prosecutorial experience. So I guess, just by way of explaining, well, why do they say that stupid thing about the ham sandwich? There's your answer, right? She's got no prosecutorial experience whatsoever. She's indicting the former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Alexandria, Virginia, just a stone's throw from the Capitol, in front of a grand jury, almost certainly including federal workers, probably even FBI workers, possibly, although maybe they got dismissed from the, from a grand jury, but I don't know. But the FBI enjoys a particularly good reputation, I think, among, generally speaking, did anyway, among federal employees. It's not that easy. I mean, it is if you're just like, well, I don't know. I guess they might have a case. I guess if they want to embarrass themselves at trial, go ahead. There might be a little bit of backhandedness in all of this. But what I'm saying is, with no prosecutorial experience whatsoever and like 3 days to prepare, a competent human being can come in to court with a 2-page, pasted together complaint, possibly written by ChatGPT, and get that indictment. That's why the ham sandwich thing is relevant. How could a ham sandwich have murdered anybody? A gentle ham sandwich, poor gentle ham sandwich, being framed by 2 pieces of white bread, no less. And, how can you possibly? Because the law says, I'm telling you, I'm the long arm of the law. This guy probably sort of kind of did it. We're going to totally have evidence of it. And that's all it takes. So prosecutorial experience or not, you can get the job done. But don't miss the fact that she's really not up to it. And that's how they came in with 3 counts and only got indictments on 2. Court records indicate that Ms. Halligan also tried to get the grand jury to indict Mr. Comey on a second false statement charge, and that it was rejected. The ham sandwich got away with it on that one. Halligan. I don't know why I'm thinking about it. Is Halligan the name of like is it a local, maybe a national, like a water purification company or something, or a spring water supplier, something like that? Does anybody know? No real reason to think there's any connection there, except for the fact that this person came from out of nowhere and had the means to put themselves at Mar-a-Lago to get spotted for a job. And like, is she like the Halligan water heiress or anything like that? I really don't know. I'm just curious. We got to make something interesting out of this story. In a video statement, Mr. Comey declared his innocence and welcomed an opportunity to vindicate himself at trial. He makes a nice little statement here. We will not live on our knees, and you shouldn't either. That's nice. Referring to his daughter, Maureen, don't forget about this. There's a lot of family in this biz, as it turns out. Referring to his daughter, Maureen, who was dismissed this summer from her own post at the Justice Department. Wasn't she in the Southern District of New York? He added, somebody that I love dearly recently said that fear is the tool of a tyrant, and she's right, but I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. He's speaking to us. Mr. Trump praised the move, posting on Truth Social shortly after the indictment was announced. Justice in America, all caps, of course. For a charging document as consequential as an indictment of a former FBI director, the filing was not particularly revealing. It asserts that Mr. Comey falsely claimed during the hearing, Culligan, not okay, thank you. Thanks, production mom. Culligan, yeah. Okay, not Halligan. And it's not Harrigan either, the song about spelling the last name, the wonderful last name of Harrigan. Okay, she's probably the heiress of some other crap. Anyway, so, all right, I'm glad we cleared that up. And everybody should enjoy pure, sparkling, Culligan water. It's probably great. That's a ringing endorsement. I should get a pay for that one. Anyway, for, as we were saying, for the charging document, not particularly, hefty. I don't know, feels like a C. Bulk it up a little bit. Anyway, the assertion that Comey falsely claimed during a hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee that he had not authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports regarding an investigation into, quote unquote, person one, which appears to be a reference to Hillary Clinton. That's different from individual one in other charging documents elsewhere, which where individual one was Donald Trump. This is person one. Anyway, that statement was false, the indictment charges, because Mr. Comey had, in fact, authorized person three. Person three! Oh, my God. Well, it doesn't really matter how many persons there were, but okay. The claim is that Comey had authorized someone to serve as an anonymous source in news reports regarding an FBI investigation concerning Clinton, person one. Didn't you, in fact, authorize a leak to the newspapers? No. But they say he did, and that's the lie that they think he... So, huge. Got to have a trial about that one. The document does not identify either person 1 or person 3, but at the hearing, Senator Ted Cruz, who everyone loves, pressed Comey on whether he had ever authorized his former deputy, Andrew McCabe, who Trump also hates with a white-hot passion, to discuss an investigation with a reporter. Mr. Comey stood by his answers at past hearings and denied doing so. That has its own story. They do discuss it a little bit. Career prosecutors who looked at the evidence against Comey thought the case was far too weak to justify an indictment, according to people familiar with the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity. For one thing, the key exchange was brief. For another, it referred to testimony from 3 years earlier, and Mr. Comey said he stood by those answers without elaborating. So, right now it's a he said, she said situation. The vague description of authorizing someone at the FBI to share information with a journalist, though, could also apply to a different episode from that period. So it may be that I was talking about that one, and that one wasn't a lie. You were talking about that one, and golly, we were confused, and that would be enough for a jury to say, I'm not beyond a reasonable doubt here. That's basically what's happening. Republicans have criticized Comey over designating a college professor whom he trusted, Daniel Richman, as a special government employee. Remember those under Dodgy? Well, they had them before. A special government employee who then spoke to a reporter for the New York Times. While the wording of the indictment leaves unclear which of these two situations is even at issue. Though in recent days, investigators have re-interviewed Mr. Richman, according to people familiar with the matter. Mr. Comey faces up to 5 years in prison if convicted, believe it or not, though many current and former prosecutors believe the case will be difficult to prove, which is why they didn't want to bring the charges in the first place. Shortly after the indictment was made public, Troy A. Edwards Jr., Mr. Comey's son-in-law, resigned his post as a prosecutor in the office that brought the charges against the former FBI director. So Comey's son-in-law is one of the career prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia, which I guess if you're conspiracy-minded, you might say, well, of course the career prosecutors at the Eastern District of Virginia recommended against these charges. Well, there's more than just him, of course. But again, his daughter was an assistant U.S. attorney up in the Sovereign District of New York, as Greg likes to tell you people in the biz sometimes call it. And his son-in-law, I don't know whether maybe he's married to Maureen. It doesn't really say, but maybe he's got more than one daughter. And anyway, it's the family biz, law enforcement, I guess. Edwards, who helped prosecute January 6th rioters, so it's amazing that he's even still in his job anyway, including members of the far-right Oath Keepers, said in an email to his supervisor that he left. He's not in the job now. He left to, quote, uphold his duty to the Constitution and the country. I can't fulfill that duty here, is basically what he was saying. Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, in a statement, warned that the indictment underscored how the president intended to deploy the justice system. This kind of interference is a dangerous abuse of power. Our system depends on prosecutors making decisions based on evidence and the law, not on the personal grudges of a politician determined to settle scores. Trump, who claims his actions are motivated by the weaponization of government against him, has intensified his public pressure campaign on Justice Department in recent days. He has publicly called upon Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, believe it or not, to use her power to go after adversaries that he has described as, quote, scum. So you need to know that, including Mr. Comey and Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, who sued Trump for inflating the value of his assets. Bondi and her top deputy have quietly raised concerns that the case against Mr. Comey was too weak to result in convictions. Please don't make us do it, sir. According to current and former officials, but she appeared to embrace the move in a social media post without mentioning Comey by name, writing, "No one is above the law." But she forgot the comma. No, one is above the law, and it's my boss. FBI Director, Kash Patel, suggested on social media that the indictment would not be the administration's last against what he referred to as, quote, previous corrupt leadership and their enablers, but he did it at a higher register. He added, Everyone, especially, we could use the voice for him. Everyone, especially in those positions of power, will be held to account, no matter their perch. It doesn't really sound like that, but he's got a weird voice. Many current and former Justice Department officials said they viewed the filing of criminal charges against Comey as deeply troubling. The consequences could be far-reaching, they argued, including the resignations of more prosecutors over how the Trump administration has sought to use the agency and the erosion of public trust in U.S. attorneys. Last week, Trump, impatient with the lack of charges against two of his most frequent targets, forced out the U.S. attorney overseeing those investigations, Eric Seibert, in the Eastern District of Virginia, in his place. He installed Halligan and maybe Culligan water filters as well as White House aide and one of his former defense lawyers. The investigation into Comey has focused in part on whether he misled lawmakers during testimony in September 2020. This is sort of a restatement of what was above. I don't know why they didn't edit this out, but there's a little more info. The statute of limitations on that testimony, though, expires on Tuesday, meaning the clock was ticking on any related charges. That's why the urgency and why he had to fire people to make this indictment happen. The justification for directing prosecutors in Virginia to investigate Comey's congressional testimony was that he appeared remotely during the pandemic from his Virginia home. If you were wondering why is this indictment in Virginia, even close in Virginia, versus D.C. Trump has long sought to turn the criminal justice system against those who have investigated him. That's true. He has done that. Unlike his first term, Mr. Trump has stocked the uppermost positions in the Justice Department with fierce loyalists. He tried to do that in the first one, but, he only partially completed the job. And these loyalists have pursued a criminal investigation into Comey, the former CIA Director John Brennan, and others who, in Mr. Trump's telling, have plotted against him. There's a little bit more. It's actually quite important. We'll sort through it, and then we'll hopefully deliver on some of the lightning round that was promised. But yeah, this is one of the ones where you really need to know the details. 2-minute break for us to, sip some tea and then watch the Republic collapse. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A nice, tall, cool glass of Culligan water. Maybe we can turn him into a sponsor, but maybe it can be part of our mnemonic somehow for remembering this, the new U.S. Attorney's name. Anyway, I better get to the rest of these details from this New York Times piece. I did skim this one last night, and I thought, for whatever reason, some stuff that they stuck in at the end somehow feels like it was important, even though they did do a weird brief detour and recap stuff they had covered earlier. Anyway, we were in the middle of explaining sort of the background and who else they're going after, right? They also want to try to indict John Brennan from the CIA because the CIA, because everybody, the entire intelligence community was wondering how far do these connections go between Trump and Russia? And they had legitimate questions, and the Mueller report is plenty damning. Not that anybody did anything with it, but, so now he wants to prosecute everybody who ever said anything bad about Trump. After securing an indictment at the federal courthouse in Alexandria on Thursday evening, that was the very one we're talking about, Ms. Halligan entered a courtroom which is new for her, to notify a magistrate judge of the outcome, accompanied by a group of nearly a dozen prosecutors, including Maggie Cleary, Ms. Halligan's top subordinate. Maggie Cleary, that was it. That's where I saw the name mentioned. That was the person who, at some point in the transition between Siebert and Halligan, their name came up, her name came up as the more likely replacement after all. But no, she's now top deputy, I guess. The judge, this is interesting, Lindsey R. Vala. It's V-A-A-L-A. I don't know how you say it. I guess Vala, as opposed to Valhalla. Not Valhalla either, where Kash Patel is headed, or so he thinks. The judge, Lindsey R. Vala, noted that the grand jury, maybe this was the Lindsey that Trump thought was a really good lawyer, because it can't be Lindsey Halligan. It was Lindsey Vala, the judge, but I doubt it. Anyway, the judge, Lindsey Vala, noted that the grand jury did not indict Mr. Comey on one of the counts, but voted to charge him on the two others. I'm a little bit confused, she said. This has never happened before. Now, I don't know that it's never happened before, but the judge is in a much better position to know that than I am. And maybe it's rare, or maybe it's never happened in Eastern District of Virginia, or never in the judge's experience. But that should speak to how rare it is. That's the kind of comment you make. I've never seen the ham sandwich get away with it before, but only in one. But even in one count, I mean that should tell you something else, by the way, about how unusual what's going on in the D.C. Grand juries actually is. But yeah. That's rather amazing. So I've never seen this before. This has never happened before. Judge Vala also recognized the unusual hour, given that prosecutors reached her chambers well past the typical hour that grand juries are dismissed. So there was definitely a little arm twisting going on here. They were holding the grand jury longer. I don't know whether, it could be that the term of the grand jury was also about to expire, as well as the statute of limitations. I don't know. But they held them over on Thursday night. Listen, we're close, and the big boss wants results. Give us an indictment and do it now. They don't have to, but they agreed. All right, let's get the hell out of here. We'll give you 2 out of the 3 indictments. I don't think we've ever met this late, Judge Vala told a juror. That is interesting, something to keep in mind. Mr. Comey is not the first former head of the FBI to face criminal charges. Why, just the other day, 1978, former, not even just regular head of the FBI, but former acting head of the Bureau during Watergate. So, okay, that's a different kettle of fish, as you might say. L. Patrick Gray. Name ring a bell for Watergate fans? L. Patrick Gray was indicted on charges of conspiring to violate the constitutional rights of Americans. That's a heftier sounding indictment than the 2-page, that guy might have lied to Congress, which is full of liars, but, you're still not supposed to lie. Anyway, prosecutors said he, Gray, authorized agents to break into homes without warrants. That does seem bad. In a hunt for fugitive members of the Weather Underground, the far left militant group. Well, we've come full circle. Pretty soon they'll be kicking in your doors looking for fugitive members of the, ham sandwich underground. The charges against Mr. Gray were dropped 2 years later. So, yes, they got an indictment. No, they never went anywhere. This would be the first time that, I guess, I don't know whether they went to trial with Gray and then never finished the trial, or they just dropped it pre-trial, or what. Anyway, some of you may know. Mr. Comey, who was confirmed as the 7th director of the FBI in 2013, was abruptly fired by Mr. Trump 4 years later as his bureau investigated, because they are a bureau of investigation, right? So it's kind of understandable why they did this. This bureau, the federal one, was investigating whether members of Mr. Trump's campaign had conspired with Russian intelligence operatives. You'd want to know that, seeking to interfere in the 2016 election. And they did. And they knew it, and they fired him anyway. And then that's where Robert Mueller, who also has directed the FBI, said, maybe we should look into this. Oh, I did. And guess what I found? There's real reason to believe that actually happened. And then they fired him too. Or at least, anyway. And they dismissed his report, certainly. Mr. Comey's firing eventually led to the appointment of Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III, or III, as AIII would have it, to oversee the Russia investigation, a fraught 2 years from which Mr. Trump emerged with his presidency more or less intact. Unlike my voice, holy cow. And I'm turning into Alex Jones, who, by the way, just lightning round item, apparently is now sporting a Hitler mustache because he can in America, where there's no incitement to violence ever happening on the right. And he's decided that, by the way, he's free to do it. And he's another guy, actually quite like Charlie Kirk, who the two of them both sort of lived their life with a what the F are you going to do about it attitude with their enemies. I mean, at least Charlie Kirk had the maybe redeeming factor of living a double life to cover up for some of his awfulness, and Alex Jones has never bothered to do that. Anyway, so that's where Alex Jones is, wearing a Hitler mustache and running around and saying, no, you can't touch me. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. I think Charlie Kirk probably felt the same way about most things, and then something happened. It was bad. So, it's just bad lifestyle advice, I would say. Anyway, Mr. Comey's eventual firing led to the appointment of Mueller. And Mr. Trump, of course, his enmity only intensified over the years as he railed against what he called a witch hunt, enclosed in quotes. Comey, in turn, became one of the most high-profile critics of the president, comparing him to a mafia boss. As Mr. Trump campaigned for a second term and faced multiple criminal indictments, Mr. Comey warned that a second Trump presidency posed a danger to all Americans, probably starting with him. And then, of course, I don't think they make mention of the nefarious plot to spell out 8647 with shells on the beach. But that did happen. By the way, where did that happen? I should look that up because it just popped into my head. Did he do that was he in Florida? Was he in Naples? For some reason, that's in my head, but that might be because there's another story, a lightning round story out there about Naples, Florida, and Kristi Noem, which we may or may not get around to. But if we do, remind me why I wanted to say that. So anyway, by the time something happened, by then, what was then? When Mr. Comey warned that a second Trump presidency, would pose a danger to all Americans. By then, there was little doubt that Trump's return to the White House posed particular danger to Comey. The case in the Eastern District of Virginia is one of 3 that the Trump administration has opened relating to Comey. According to people familiar with the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity, there's one in the Western District of Virginia, too. Why? How so? Federal prosecutors and agents have in recent weeks interviewed a number of former FBI officials about how certain classified documents related to the Russia inquiry came to be found in certain parts of FBI headquarters in 2025. That still doesn't explain it, right? Where's FBI headquarters? Washington, D.C. Why are we talking to people in the Western District of Virginia? You don't have to go too far west, but an hour's drive to, Winchester, Virginia, I think, will get you to the Western District of Virginia. Now, maybe a little more than an hour because it's an hour drive from where I am, and it's still 40 minutes I get from Alexandria up here. But it's not that the distance is so great, it's that the traffic is so terrible. But anyway, but why the Western District of Virginia? And what is he doing? And again, here I think the game is, the evidence is thin in all these things. Any one of these cases could fall apart any second. They all should fall apart in a second because they're terrible and the evidence is super thin on all of them. But the strategy here is, let's try to indict him on as many things as we can possibly conjure up in as many jurisdictions as we possibly can so that something somewhere will stick. So the deal was he lied to Congress, which is in where? Washington, D.C. But would anybody be indicting him in Washington, D.C.? We're having trouble getting people indicted in Washington, D.C. But it was a video conference he called in during the pandemic. He was in Virginia when he did it. Try to charge him there. Great, sure. Eastern District of Virginia. I'll be right back. But just for good measure, the investigation that's taking place in the Western District, according to those familiar with the effort, it is premised on an unsubstantiated theory. Ooh, great. Great for indictments, unsubstantiated theories. An unsubstantiated theory pushed by Trump supporters. Oh, well, it's only going to be better. Tell me more. An unsubstantiated theory pushed by Trump supporters that senior intelligence officials of the FBI, ooh, it already sounds nefarious, right? Senior intelligence officials of the FBI and elsewhere, where? I don't know, elsewhere, tried to hide or destroy secret documents. You know, what was in those secret documents? Secrets on paper. Make some secret documents. They tried to hide or destroy secret documents that might cast doubt on the investigation. The investigation also being known, by the way, as Crossfire Hurricane. Very musical name. Anyway, the point is this. It's all based on unsubstantiated theories from Trump supporters that super secret documents were held by the FBI and they tried to destroy them all. But we found them. Now, how is it that you found them? Super sleuthing? Well, the inquiry, the piece continues, has bewildered many current and former law enforcement officials. Since the printed copies of classified documents, the ones they said, oh, we're going to destroy them. And by the way, nobody mishandles classified documents around Donald Trump, damn it. Nobody does that and gets away with it. But printed copies of classified documents have for decades been backed up on computers. So like if you shredded those papers, you could just go to the computer and print another copy. And who's in charge of doing that right now? Kash Patel. So it won't be hard. So that's kind of, I guess, why you haven't seen the case in that instance advance very far. You go to the grand jury and say, he was going to shred documents. But did he? He didn't, but he was gonna. And who says so? Trump supporters. Oh, okay, and what's your reason for believing that? QAnon told me. That's it. So that's kind of why it hasn't advanced. But again, why Western District of Virginia? FBI headquarters is in Washington, D.C. Did Comey take the documents home and store them in his bathroom or ballroom like Donald Trump did? If so, that would be Eastern District of Virginia. Why the West? Well, internally, Justice Department officials have justified placing much of that investigation in Western Virginia because the FBI operates a document storage facility in Winchester, Virginia, west of the Northern Virginia suburbs, according to people familiar with the matter. Now, if you thought there must be more in order to make sense out of this, no. There is not. There's more to the article, but that's it. The FBI sometimes stores documents in Winchester, Virginia. Did they store these in Winchester, Virginia? I don't know. That's what the indictment will find out. No, I don't think so. Some Trump administration officials have been reluctant to impanel grand juries in Washington in politically sensitive cases because of concerns that jurors and grand jurors in the largely Democratic city will be resistant to cases against Mr. Trump's perceived foes. But the reality is that there's also this huge problem of you don't have any evidence and the case you're making doesn't belong in criminal court anyway. Go away. Plus, we don't like you. Now, Todd Gilbert, who happens to be the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Virginia, abruptly resigned over the summer, only 1 month after being appointed to the job. Hooray! Career pinnacle for Todd Gilbert. And then a month later, I hate law anyway. I'm leaving. No one knows why. The office has declined to give a reason for Mr. Gilbert's sudden departure, but maybe it has something to do with the idea that you should be indicting the former FBI director because the FBI sometimes stores documents. Maybe these, maybe not. It doesn't matter because they've all been scanned into a computer anyway, and they weren't destroyed, and Comey didn't have them, and they weren't in his house. But they might one day have had a copy of them filed in Winchester, Virginia. Will you please bring an indictment? I'd actually rather kill myself and or resign from practice of law on the federal prosecutorial side forever. And that's what they did. So there you go. That was supposed to justify us reading through the entire article. And I actually think it did, just to illustrate the depth of the problem here. Now, maybe lightning round and note to self about carrying on from this point forward. Oh, look, I'm finding all my other notes from yesterday that I don't think I actually successfully went back to. Oh, I was looking for I had made a note to myself to look for the ZTO, I think it was ZTO, video of the compilation of the worst moments of the UN speech. Well, we're past that now. Although, if you're still interested in it, let me know. Let's see. Oh, I mentioned that Kristi Noem was in the news, and that's true. But that reminds me, though, I wanted to look up, what was it? It was, why is Sean Penn in my news? Okay, never mind. Distraction of news scan. I was looking for James Comey and the 8647 thing that he did. I'm just curious about that because let's see, where does it say where he was on what beach? It's not super important that we know, but I was wondering if it was a fun premise for a segue. Anyway, you'd think that it was more likely that he was on the beach in Virginia or perhaps the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which is also entirely possible. But let's imagine that he was instead in Naples, Florida, so that we can do this and pretend it's a segue to the story about Kristi Noem. I really wish nobody wants to say up front where he was. All right, I'm going to click on a PBS story about this and see if they'll tell me in the first paragraph or not. Let's see. Cool shell formation on my beach walk. Does it say where he was? There's Kristi Noem is in this story, though, saying that maybe they would investigate it because that's obviously an assassination threat. You remember that. Anyway, if you do pretend that he was in Naples, Florida at the time, then you could go to the story about Kristi Noem. It's not a major thing in the light of everything, but Kristi Noem, ProPublica reports, fast-tracked millions in disaster aid to Florida tourist attraction after campaign donor intervened. Long story short here in this one is that down in Naples, Florida gets beat up by hurricanes with fair regularity, and they had some damage to their pier, which I guess it is something of a I don't know if it was a tourist attraction, but I mean if you go to the beach in Naples, you go to the beach anywhere, you see a nice pier, you want to take a walk out on it, it's a nice thing to do. If you're a tourist, you've now been attracted to this pier. It's now a tourist attraction. It's not like a moneymaker or anything, but anyway, I guess it got damaged in one of the 18,000 hurricanes that the place gets all the time and was in need of repair, and local authorities were having no luck getting any federal assistance to rebuild the pier, which, in the grand scheme of things, maybe people's houses that have been destroyed by hurricanes ought to be help. They need help with those. Although in Naples, very often, people don't need as much help per se. But that help could have gone to North Carolina, rural North Carolina, with its damage, etc. And, of course, keeping in mind in the dodgy era how Kristi Noem insisted on personally being consulted, and she had to do a personal sign-off for any expenditure from the Department of Homeland Security. Over $100,000, which is like everything. So there's a lot of auto penning going on over there now. But she this time decided, we're going to move FEMA money because a campaign donor to my campaign, I guess up in South Dakota, has called me. They got a place in Naples, I guess, and they wanted the pier fixed so they could take their grandkids fishing on it. Something like, who knows what it was. I don't know what the motivation was, but they called up and said, my pier. And all of a sudden, $11 million shakes loose. The local officials, people in other states that had been damaged by hurricanes couldn't shake a dime loose on anything. But the pier got fixed for $11 million because, a donor called. And that's approved procedure in the Trump administration. All right. Anyway, so there's details on that one. ProPublica, as always, knocked themselves out, dragging this, chasing the story down. You should take a look at it, but you should do it on your own time over the weekend, as with all of these things. All right, other things. I mean, golly, there's all sorts of related stuff. The very next story in my queue is, related. You could make a segue to it. We'll try and, long story short, this one too, so we can get to more stuff. Notice, Notus, notus.org. We've read a couple of pieces from them before. They have a story under the headline, Billions in Taxpayer Dollars Have Become Virtually Untraceable, which is excellent for thievery, a great way for the Trump administration to be able to skim that money off and stick it in their pockets. Don't know if that's what happened, but closer to home, more of a constitutional problem. Later on, you can get to, if you ever find the money, you can charge the people with stealing it. But of course, they might be pardoned by the president, or they might be the president. The Trump administration's aggressive approach to overhauling, wrong word there, but the executive branch has obscured how federal dollars are actually being spent, even for the members of Congress. That is to say, even from the members of Congress. Really, what's happening here? Important, given that we are now 5 days from federal shutdown, that meaning the end of the fiscal year. And we're now learning some of the plans for the administration going into it, right? Russell Vought saying this time we're going to fire everybody while the government is shut down. But also, one of the other major plays happening, it's been discussed and been reported in the foreign policy context. That is to say, foreign aid that was held up, blockaded, claimed to have been, purported to have been impounded by the president, which is, illegal, unconstitutional, what have you. And John Roberts really dragging his heels in all of this as part of the plan, it really seems like. Basically granting administrative stays from the shadow docket to proceedings in the lower federal courts, seeking to straighten this situation out. The president says he can unilaterally stop these billions of dollars in foreign aid from being spent. The Constitution and Supreme Court precedent says otherwise. Shall we have this thing decided? John Roberts says, hold your horses. Not yet. But there's another issue out there, which is if that money was appropriated as part of the fiscal year 2025 budget, and the fiscal year expires at the end of September 30th, and the money isn't spent, we've now run out of authorization to spend that money. So it's illegally and unconstitutionally been impounded, and that could still be a problem. And even John Roberts might say, yeah, you can't do that. But what doesn't matter anymore, it's now moot because it's now October 1st, and there's no legal basis for spending that money anymore. I blocked the decision that would have led to it inevitably having been declared illegal and unconstitutional until October 1st, but no real reason for that. Don't look over here, look over there. So that's what's going on, though, and it's happening in other areas besides just foreign aid, and I think that's the thrust of this Notice story by Anna Kramer and Mark Alfred, probably just Alfred, why not? We'll make it exotic sounding. It was mid-September when Senator Lisa Murkowski, who's always on top of this stuff, parsing this stuff on a razor's edge. Anyway, Murkowski discovered that the Trump administration had pulled education funding for institutions serving Alaskan and Hawaiian natives, right? So you pulled education funding. Who cares? I'm a Republican. Oh, it's for my state? Well, now I really care. But on the other hand, maybe I'll just end up deeply troubled and voting in favor of it anyway. In the end, if it turns out that I could put a stop to it, I won't. Anyway, how much? Close to $350 million. That's just what we found out about, she told Notice last week as Congress sat in a stalemate over how to prevent a government shutdown. The Department of Education announced a change on September 10th, stating that the funding intended for those programs would be repurposed for other unspecified education programs, like maybe a pier in Naples. Murkowski said she has no idea where the money is going. Not that it really matters. It was only supposed to go here. The law said so. But F law, who cares? Across federal agencies, the Trump administration's aggressive slash and burn approach to federal programs, grants, and contracts has repeatedly been challenged, or has repeatedly challenged Congress's power of the purse. You remember that one? The administration has claimed It has the discretion to redirect funds to programs aligned with Trump's agenda. The Republican congressional leaders have largely let them do it. This all goes back also to Jamel Bowie's piece that we read the other day, which was a successful encapsulation, I think, of stuff we've been telling you all along, which is that actually it's really important for you to jealously guard your prerogatives. That was the design of the Constitution and of the founders. But F it, who cares? This is just one of those mischiefs of faction that the founders also talked about, so must be okay. The outcome, billions in taxpayer dollars have become virtually untraceable, a level of opaqueness in government funds that's raising questions about the legality of the administration's actions. And that's another important part of this, too. I don't know I guess, other than the fact that this is the Trump administration, I guess by itself, there's no real reason to believe that the money is disappearing and being stolen. But it is the Trump administration. So the other part of this story is not only is it being blocked, right? But, let's say, compare it to this story. It's not a very good comparison necessarily, but lots of people are talking about it, and it gives us a chance to mention the fact that Tom Homan took $50,000 in cash in what was it? I forget where the bag was from. Somewhere healthy that he would never eat. Anyway, he took $50,000 in a paper bag, and one, we're not doing anything about it. And two, people have been saying, so what happened to the $50,000, by the way? They actually gave it to him in cash. Did he keep it? I mean, he probably still doesn't have it. He probably spent it on a boat or something dumb. Or maybe he bet it online. I don't know. Anyway, he bought Bitcoin. Trump coin. There you go. Probably what happened to it. That's why he was allowed to keep it. He converted it into Trump coin. So now it's okay. You're pardoned. But people are asking, well, what happened to the cash? Right? I mean, not the same. But you can ask the same question here. You block the money. You get John Roberts to drag his feet. Fine. So you don't appropriate the money. You don't spend it from the federal side. Okay, I understand that. But what happened to the money? Now, a lot of this stuff is electronic blips and bleeps, I guess. But it's out there and it's valid stuff. So where is the money? And the answer not Lisa Halligan this time, but Lisa Murkowski has is, I don't know. I'm not sure where it went. And I guess the assumption all along has been, it's probably a bad assumption, well, it's sitting in the Treasury or whatever, some federal account somewhere. But is it? I don't know. You don't know. And the Trump administration won't say. And it is Trump. Do you really have any reason to believe, well, I'm sure it's safely ensconced in a federal account somewhere. You don't. Oh. Well, that's actually fairly serious. But if you don't have to spend it or account for it, maybe he does that. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's dive back into it. And we got to get to like 10 million different things. And I'm already violating my pledge to do that. But, you know, details are where it's at. It's interesting stuff. So we mentioned across federal agencies, the aggressive slash and burn approach to everything has challenged Congress's power of the purse. They've largely let him get away with it because Republicans are in charge of both houses and no one knows what's happening to the money. It goes on to say, correctly, billions in taxpayer dollars have become virtually untraceable, a level of opaqueness of government funds that's raising questions, right, around the legality of the administration's actions, but also a literal question of what happens, like physically and accounting-wise, to the money. Right? Some of these taxpayer funds expire on September 30th. They say some because some of it would obviously be discretionary spending. That's the sum that they're talking about. The sum that they're not talking about is mandatory spending. And the budget, generally speaking, divided along those lines. There's mandatory spending where you don't need to reauthorize the spending from year to year, stuff like Social Security, etc. And discretionary spending where you have to have an appropriations bill for it. Basically, to the extent that the government shuts down when there is a lack of funding, that's discretionary spending. If it's not happening, it's just because it was discretionary spending and it wasn't authorized and appropriated for before the deadline. If it's still happening, like Social Security checks that do continue to go out during a shutdown, although there are ways to disrupt that too. But the reason that the funding is there is because that's mandatory spending. That doesn't need a year-to-year appropriation. Anyway, the problem arises where paying the people who send out the checks is discretionary spending. That can happen. So watch out for that. But then, of course, those people are usually, if you're looking to not anger the whole of America at you, you declare the workers who do that essential personnel and force them to work without pay during a government shutdown. And then furlough them afterwards. Anyway, but yeah. So the usual stuff, some of those taxpayer funds expire on September 30th. And those funds, if they're not spent by then, like all funds Congress appropriated specifically for 2025, those funds, the word they've chosen here, disappear. Well, putting a finer point on it would be the authorization, the authority to spend that money disappears. What happens to the money? And that's a good question. And there, federal accounting, a little weird, fiat currency, the fact that this is not done in hard physical cash helps complicate all of this stuff. That there are blips and bleeps in the ether doesn't help here either. Does the money disappear? Well, you could say if it's actually sitting in federal coffers, if it's in a bank account, you say, well, we'll just use it next year. Like the more money for us to appropriate in 2026. In some sense, yes. And there's probably enough to cover that if you just make that your assumption and pretend you're doing that. But does it disappear? Not really disappear. The authorization disappears. The money doesn't. What happens to the money? Well, what if it also disappears? Not because, poof, it changed years, but because, poof, I stole it. And if you no longer have to account for the money, I don't account. Well, what happened to it? I don't know, and it doesn't matter because the authority to spend it ran out. Yes, but did you steal it? Did you take the $350 million that was supposed to go to Alaska and just take it because you knew, well, it doesn't have to show up in Alaska anymore. We know that much. And, it's just going to get lost among the trillions of dollars in various federal accounts. You could engineer that theft. If you also could pardon yourself from any crime, let's say. Did they do it? I don't know. Do you have reason to believe that they did it, or is it just too dumb of a caper? I don't know. Neither does Lisa Murkowski. Notice attempted to trace the money appropriated for more than 100 government programs to understand where taxpayer dollars are going. People are into that, as it turns out, only to hit dead ends repeatedly. Data is outdated or conflicting. Agencies have been vague in their explanations, and in many cases, there's no publicly available evidence that appropriated money is being spent at all. The connection between Congress's decisions and current spending should be obvious, but in many cases today, it's obscured. Lawmakers and their staff told Notice they've faced the same barriers. I don't think that there's been anything close to the transparency that we would hope, Murkowski said. That's a vague and stupid statement. We're kind of finding out about it at the very last minute. When asked if she felt confident that she can get the information she needs, she responded, No, I get it by reading something in the newspaper. In February, the Environmental Protection Agency revealed a second round of dodgy-led grant cuts by sharing the information with the New York Post. The agency went on to pass along the precise details of the EPA's early cuts to Madeline Rowley, a reporter at the Free Press. So, whatever. Right-wing violence, to the truth. The day after the agency emailed with Rowley, House and Senate appropriations staff from both parties jointly requested the EPA turn over the specifics of the 20 grants terminated in February to, the people who made the grants. Congress. Can we please get a list of which grants were canceled, recipient, amount per grant, program, and how these grants were funded? Base, IIJA, IRA, insider terminology. Which program did they use to make or not make these grants? Senior Republican appropriations staffer Daniel Mencher asked via email. I would hope that since this is on the EPA website, we'll get a quick response. Some of them are on page 6, he noted, linking to the New York Post page 6 story. EPA Deputy Assistant Administrator Daniel Coogan asked his colleagues to refrain from sending the list. to the Hill for the time being. Why? I don't know. Agency staffers spent over a day debating whether to fully loop in Congress. It's not really a debate. I don't object to those being sent, but recognize there are a lot of moving parts, the Hill, right now. Paige Hansen, who at the time was senior advisor at the EPA, wrote to colleagues, these previously unreported emails, reviewed by notice, are among a tranche of documents filed in court in a court case against the Trump administration for terminating those grants. They reveal congressional Republicans' efforts to ascertain how the Trump administration is spending funds and the lack of clarity they have received in response. The EPA told Notice it answered Congress's request and, as always, worked diligently to fill every request from our partners in Congress to keep staff apprised of EPA actions. The emails show, however, that congressional appropriations staff were still seeking basic information about the EPA's cuts weeks later. Oh, we answered those requests with no. That doesn't count. In mid-March, EPA congressional liaison Sarah Talmadge passed along a spreadsheet listing a dozen grants to Mencher. Below is a list of grant terminations, she wrote, adding, "We'll make sure to update you on a rolling basis." Can you help me better understand what these reflect? Mencher asked Talmadge. This is Senate appropriations staff, not knowing what these numbers are about. That's bad news. The latest was 400 grants totaling $1.7 billion per the press release. Anyway, you told the newspapers this, but not us. The amounts on this list, though, only total $6.5 million out of $1.7 billion. That is not close to the majority of that money. Just trying to close the gap between what's in the press releases and what is below. So what are we talking about? 6.5 million by a factor of 10. If they were off by only a factor of 10, that would be $65 million. But no, more than that. Off by a factor of 100, $650 million. Off by, if they were off by a factor of 100, that would bring us to $650 million out of $1.7 billion. Still not there. So about a factor of 200 or so, I would guess, if my math is correct. And it never is. It will take some time to process the full 400 grants that were canceled. Talmadge said, as such, we will send you updates on a rolling basis. Again, where's the roll? But it hasn't rolled anywhere. But to confirm, these are from the fourth grant cancellation announcement, Mencher asked. What about the grants from the previous three cancellations? We've been asking for those for 6+ weeks, he added. Staff for the chair of Senate Appropriations Committee declined to comment. In May, facing questions on grant cuts from both Republicans and Democratic lawmakers at a hearing on the agency's 2026 budget proposal, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin repeatedly testified his agency would, quote, continue to be distributing funding appropriated by Congress as we go through the rest of the fiscal year. Oh, really? That's your one job, guy. Thanks for telling us. It is our intent, anyway, to continue to be spending money. Is English your first language, Lee? It is our intent to continue to be spending money that was appropriated by Congress, he said later in the hearing, even going so far as to suggest that the spending could even include some of the grants that had been canceled. He just wanted to get out of there, I guess. But now, 1 week before the end of the fiscal year, it appears that the administration has not spent those funds. That's one way to cut an agency. Just sit there and do nothing. EPA conducted a robust assessment of grant funding and looked to re-obligate it in a manner accountable to the taxpayers. How? And in line with administration priorities, except Congress determines what's in a manner accountable to the taxpayers. In that time, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was signed into law on July 4th, 2025, which rescinds the appropriated funds for environmental and climate justice block grants, one out of the 400 things they're looking for. EPA is working diligently to implement the law in accordance with congressional intent. They're not. The agency said in response to notice questions about what happened with the money. EPA made the same argument in defense of grant cancellations in a July legal filing. That case now pending a decision from the judge. Unless, John Roberts says don't do it. It remains unclear what other canceled funding the Trump administration has no intention of spending. The article goes on from there, but I think you get the gist of things. Take that alongside, again, what Jamel Bowie reminded us of just the other day and see how serious this really is. Well, Congress determines what we'll be spending money on. Yeah, except it's up to us to execute the law as written, right? Constitutional demands, faithfully execute the law. What if we just don't? Well, then you'll sue us. And what if the Supreme Court just says, I don't really want to hear about it? Well, we hadn't figured on that. Yeah. All right, so that's pending out there, something to think about. There's lots more detail in this article. It would be well worth our time, I think, to read through it, but there's so much more. Small update I want to add to something we mentioned yesterday, just in terms of the number of countries now facing incursions from Russia, yes, or from Russia, maybe, among our NATO allies. Further developments, further comment from Denmark, which was added to the list yesterday, as drones were found from unknown origin. Drones making it impossible for air traffic to safely ingress and egress from several Danish airports. Europe is at hybrid war. That's a headline you don't really want to see. Hybrid is the new edition. Europe at war. Well, Europe, we got the Pathé News reel would be telling us about that. We would find that much more concerning. Where's that sound, right? You remember them? Now spin in the headline, Europe at war, but it's hybrid war. What's hybrid war? We don't know. Scary. Well, that's what the no less an authority than the Danish Prime Minister has said. There is one obvious antagonist, quote, and that is Russia, unquote, according to the Danish Prime Minister. That's Mette Frederiksen, the Danish Prime Minister, and once again, foolishly stumbling into having to pronounce names of foreign leaders. But here's the word from Seb Starcevich, I guess is probably the last name of the reporter at Politico, who has put this piece together. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen warned Thursday a hybrid war has started in Europe after waves of drones shut down Danish airspace this week. Danish authorities temporarily closed two major airports overnight Wednesday after drones were sighted in the skies in what Copenhagen called a hybrid attack by a, quote, professional actor, with several other airports across the country reporting similar incidents. Copenhagen and Oslo airports were also shut down on Monday due to drone incursions, forcing flights to be canceled and stranding thousands. Oslo, of course, not in Denmark, in another country that would add to the list of countries that have been experiencing probably Russian incursions and or definitely Russian incursions. Sometimes warplanes, sometimes drones, sometimes who knows what else. So there you go. The airspace breaches showed, quote, we are at the beginning of a hybrid war again against Europe. I don't think what she meant here is we're not at war with Europe. We are Europe, and the hybrid war is against us. Just to make sure you understand that one. Frederiksen said in an address to the nation posted on social media. Yikes. I think we are going to see more of it. We see the pattern, and it does not look good, she added. Frederiksen said Danish authorities had yet to identify who is behind the hybrid attacks, and that's part of the point of hybrid attacks, against our airports and other critical infrastructure, but hinted the Kremlin was responsible. We can at least state that there is primarily one country that poses a threat to Europe's security, and that is Russia, she said. Europe has been rattled by a series of airspace incursions involving Russian jets and drones in recent weeks. Estonia and Poland convened NATO members for urgent talks after accusing Russia of violating their airspace in separate incidents. But calling it all no problem and just general routine stuff is apparently the United States saying, Russian warplanes in our airspace, what are you going to do? Moscow has denied responsibility for the Estonian incursion and said the Polish incident, which saw a swarm of drones fly across into Polish airspace, was an accident. Just hours after Frederiksen's address, Aalborg Airport in the country's north was briefly closed for the second night in a row due to suspected drone incursions. Frederiksen said she could not promise no drones will cross the border, but added Copenhagen had raised the alert level and was stepping up its drone repelling defenses. So we might start to see some shoot downs here. This means that the defense and police will be more present with anti-drone capabilities around critical infrastructure in the coming time. Adding, Ukraine was providing expertise on combating drones. So ROI there, return on investment in backing Ukraine. Earlier this month, the Danish Defense Ministry announced it would purchase the Franco-Italian SAMP, S-A-M-P/T, SAMP-T, I don't know how they say it, air defense system for 58 billion Danish kroner. Well, we don't know how much that's worth, right? Well, it's 7.7 billion euros, which we also don't know what it is, but you get the sense of this, the size of the purchase. Its largest arms purchase ever, and it's not coming from the United States, by the way, whom they do not trust any further than they trust Russia, as it turns out. Frederickson ended her address by calling for Europe to ramp up defense spending, which actually only pleases Trump anyway. They should be calling him, look, we're doing what you ask. That is why we're expanding the European defense industry, and that is why we are building up the defense industry in Denmark, she said. The events of recent days emphasize how important this is. And I guess it's time for them to modernize their defenses. It's no longer sufficient to fling tins of butter cookies at your enemies or canned hams, although they can do a tremendous amount of damage, and if launched at great enough velocity, possibly pierce Russian armor. But the problem is you have to indict those hams first, and you can't always get away with that. But that's scary stuff in light of the fact that, one, we are experiencing incursions in our own airspace. But if you dismiss that as more or less routine, and I think it's almost fair to actually do that, you still have other problems. Like, for instance, this one, where drunk-ass Secretary of God only knows what, Pete Hic-seth, has flexed his muscles a little bit and is ordering, apparently, hundreds of senior military officers to come to Virginia for a highly unusual meeting. And that's just basically because the whole thing is going to be nude. I don't know why it's that's not the reason it's unusual. The reason is they are gathering hundreds of senior military officers in one place, which is also weird and historically troubling. And we don't know what it is, but, with a Trump administration, you can't rule anything out. So everybody's like, are they firing them all? Are they murdering them all? Are they just not aware that, hey, that's not a wise idea, not only to summon all the top brass, like literally all the top brass of all the branches of the military to one place and say, hey, everybody, print that in the newspapers during the era of drone attack. Seems unwise at a minimum, but CNN is putting it, mildly. Haley Britsky and Zachary Cohen teaming up for this story. Hundreds of U.S. generals and admirals from around the globe, they are from here, but they are around the globe, have been called to Virginia for a meeting with Defense Secretary Pete Hic-seth, and this meeting could have been an email. Next Tuesday, several U.S. officials told CNN, though the reason for the meeting is unclear, although, I think they note probably in the article, but if that doesn't ring a bell for you, next Tuesday also happens to be the end of the fiscal year, and government shutdown is looming, and I don't know what he has to tell them, but it could be anything. The meeting is expected to be held at hey, Russia, I guess if you're listening, at the military installation in Quantico, Virginia, multiple officials said, adding that no one seems to know what the meeting is about, including the general and flag officers themselves, or why it was suddenly added to the calendar. One source familiar said they'd heard theories ranging from a group physical fitness test, can you imagine that, to receiving a briefing on the state of the Defense Department, to a mass firing of officers. But regardless of the reason, the sudden convening of so many senior military officers, it is highly unusual. It's being referred to as the General Squid Games, one official quipped. Some officials also voiced security concerns about having so many high-ranking officers in one place at the same time. They should have had this meeting at Pearl Harbor, I think. The congressional aide told CNN that unless Hic-seth planned to announce a major new military campaign or a complete overhaul of the military command structure, which may be, either one, I can't imagine a good reason for this. And I still can't imagine a good reason for this because this could have been done by secure video link. but unless the announcement is our video links are no longer secure. That could be it. By the way, it does in fact raise some concerns out there. And one of the concerns, as I saw it expressed, was from is this the one? A post on Twitter by a general, sort of pointing out that, the historical precedent for this is a little worrisome. Ben Hodges, who's listed here as General_Ben, and I don't know Ben Hodges, but I mean, just to be sure of who he is, should we look that up? Ben Hodges, a retired United States Army general, and so, well within his rights, posting on Twitter, July, and it's not all here, but what is appearing in the screenshot. July 1935, German generals were called to a surprise assembly in Berlin and informed that their previous oath to the Weimar Constitution was void and that they would be required to swear a personal oath to the Führer instead. And just pointing that out, right? Pete Hic-seth put his drink down for long enough to make this totally level-headed response on Twitter. Cool story, General, because of how, professional he is. Real post on another network, we are told, by Dan Lamoth, who put this up for all to see. Anyway, back to the story about it, which is where? Oh, goodness. One of my 75 open tabs. Was it Politico? No, that was the hybrid war thing. There we go. CNN. Some officials voiced security concerns about this idea of gathering all the top brass in one place. Good idea. I mean, good idea to raise concern about it. Although maybe you want to downplay the whole thing so nobody thinks about it. The Washington Post first reported the news of the meeting early Thursday. Chief Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell confirmed that Hic-seth will be, quote, addressing his senior military leaders early next week. Thanks. That's helpful. That's why we asked you the question. The Pentagon did not answer specific questions about the purpose of the meeting or if the directive was for all general and flag officers in the military, but it's sounding that way. During a press conference in the Oval Office Thursday afternoon, President Donald Trump responded to a question about the upcoming gathering by saying, "Isn't it nice that people are coming from all over the world to meet?" It is not. Trump said that the meeting would at least partially be tied to a review of military equipment. "We have the greatest equipment in the world," he said. Good reason for a meeting. "A lot of generals want to be here. They're also going to be touring equipment sites. They're going to be talking about the newest weapons." It's unclear if the order was for all generals and flag officers, those with the rank of 1 star or higher, or just those in certain command or leadership roles. But why make anything clear? The meeting comes as the Trump administration has fired a slew of high-profile general and flag officers since taking office in January, in many instances due to Hic-seth's campaign against diversity-related issues, but often also for unspecified reasons. Hic-seth also ordered the Defense Department in May to cut the number of 4-star generals and admirals by at least 20%. Dear Pentagon, there are too many generals nowadays. Right. I am not a crackpot. The officers who've been fired thus far include, and there's a long list of them, and while they all deserve individual recognition, it's not where we're going to spend our time. In fact, let's cut this off at this point and say it's just something to keep an eye on, and it doesn't inspire a great deal of confidence. At the moment where there are incursions all over Europe and the United States, and are we taking the general, by the way, who's in charge of responding to what goes on up in Alaska and making him come and do push-ups with Hic-seth, or what's happening? I don't know. You don't know. We won't know until it's too late and we find ourselves asking questions in the newspaper like, why was the general missing? And why didn't we respond when Red Dawn happened? I don't know. There's a Substack entry of some interest, I guess, on this subject. I'll just sort of point you to it. Timothy Snyder, who says, Hic-seth puts us all at risk. Why put all the American commanders in one room? But just focusing on that aspect of it. It's a good question. He, I'm sure, speculates on it. We'll list it for you to take a look and see what you think. about that part of the question, but okay, it's on record, it's out there, it's something to worry about. Go ahead and worry about it beginning at about 11:01 Eastern Standard Time this morning. Okay, time now for us, we face our last break. We can reorganize and try and decide what comes next and what gets on the record. It's going to be a scramble. I can already see it from here. Let's see what's up next, like reverse chronologically. Oh yeah, this was of some interest. I guess maybe we won't read necessarily all the way through this one either, but I'll put it on the record in 30 seconds or less. Can I do that? HuffPost with this story: Pam Bondi transfers people who received Biden commutations to Supermax prison. I know that confused me at first. Not pardons, but these are federal death penalties that were commuted to life without parole by Biden on his way out of out of office, and they're retaliating against that by sending those people to Supermax prisons. Nice. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Again, can't spare the time at the moment to dive deep into this, but also a very interesting story. So now you're up to date. In an act of just, I guess, at least Christian tinged, because I can't speak for, Christian doctrine, but in at least Christian tinged moment of compassion and mercy, and also, actual alignment with Catholic doctrine. Joe Biden, Catholic, decided that at least some of the people facing the federal death penalty ought to have their sentences commuted to life without possibility of parole. It's not I'm going to be, this is, of course, being portrayed by Trump as soft on crime because he didn't execute them. And instead you said, they're never going to get out of prison. We're going to keep them out of society forever for what they've done. It's not a forgiveness for what they've done. It's just a recognition of the, cruelty and inappropriateness of the death penalty in his interpretation and in his Christian interpretation of it. But, actually, I don't think he framed it in explicitly Christian terms, but that's what usually, Republicans feel comfortable with, except if Biden did it. Rawr, so mad about this. So they are going to punish those people who are already in federal prison without possibility of parole by sending them to worse prisons, essentially, because Biden did this thing. And of course, Trump, I don't know. Part of his tirade in the last couple of days is, I just signed the death penalty, as you know, which, I don't think he actually did sign anything, but didn't have anything. But he's a big death penalty fan, even when people have been exonerated. I hated that guy anyway, so let's execute him. It's a real problem with this guy. And, I guess also in parallel with, and then we summoned all of the top brass to one place where something is going to happen. We don't know what. It's a little scary. So I'm going to scare the crap out of you for the weekend. What can I tell you? It was maybe our last chance to scare the crap out of you. All right. Other things to pull out of the pile here. I must have put this one aside to illustrate, I think, the fact behind it. This really did get posted somewhere. The AP reported on this, and I mentioned it yesterday that, meanwhile, Trump is out for blood over the escalator incident at the UN. Yes, I mentioned to you that it was suspected that one of the videographers that came with the Trump entourage accidentally, hit the elevator stop button. So there's some substantiation for that from the AP's reporting on this thing. But he's still pretty sure it was an assassination attempt by his own videographer. So, okay, it didn't go very well. Let's see. Okay, yes, this is more about James Comey. I think we're well covered there. More reporting. Oh, did I not share this one yesterday? I thought I did. We certainly shared the story, the Politico reporting on the White House directive to the agencies to prepare for mass firings in the event of a government shutdown. There are also long reads over the weekend that you might be interested in, and I want to mention here's a long read about a long read that we haven't read all the way through yet, but which I did put on your radar, and I think I attempted to read for Tuesday's pre-taped episode, but ran out of time. I might try to continue with that one because I'm going to need to be off the air next Thursday, but a return in the New York Times to the story of, you'll recognize it perhaps from the headline. The UAE got AI chips. Trump's inner circle got crypto riches. A very weird, a commingling of activities, both public and private, in which, AI chips that were very restricted in where they can go suddenly had the restrictions lifted and were shipped off to the UAE for a big AI project. And the UAE, the ruling monarchy there, suddenly decided to put, a couple $1 million into Trump coin. So there you go. No connections there. Another look. This time, the triumphant return of Wired magazine to their coverage of what's going on or what went on with the Dodgy boys, with an entry called The Story of Dodgy as Told by Federal Workers, which would have been a nice follow-up to the story of the reimagined story of, what was his name? Leland Dudek over at the Social Security Administration. I think this would make a good companion piece. Also, of note, just because it happened and no one really knows why, there is a story covered by NPR here. A statue of Trump and Epstein holding hands in D.C., installed as a protest, is removed as fast as it appeared. Well, you might imagine that would be the case. You'd think Trump would order such a thing, and I guess he did, but there's a twist. It's a September 24th piece by Rachel Treisman, Treiisman. A statue of President Trump holding hands with Jeffrey Epstein appeared briefly on D.C.'s National Mall this week, only to be removed after less than a day. That could be expected, except there's this. The bronze-painted, should have been gold, painted, in, maybe that's it, they took it into painted gold. The bronze-painted installation titled Best Friends Forever depicts the two men smiling at each other, each with an arm and leg raised as if in mid-frolic. Quote on the piece here, this is what it says on the plaque. In honor of Friendship Month, we celebrate the long-lasting bond between President Donald J. Trump and his, quote, closest friend, Jeffrey Epstein, reads the plaque, emblazoned with hands making a heart shape. September is widely recognized as Friendship Month, so they're not just lying. They established the fact of Friendship Month. Trump has repeatedly downplayed his relationship with Epstein, the convicted sex offender. You know who he is. But it remained a sore spot for the president as his administration faces continued calls to release the Epstein files, like this one. Release the Epstein files, you loser. I don't know. What was it? Oh, you worm. I'm thinking of something from an old movie that no one will remember. I believe it was Wildcats was the name of the movie. Goldie Hawn vehicle. Do you remember? Look it up. The line being, let her have the kids, you worm. I enjoyed that one quite a great deal. I can't explain the context. Anyway, remains a sore spot for the president. You know why. A group called the Secret Handshake claimed responsibility for the statue after it arrived on a national mall on Tuesday morning. And while a National Park Service permit issued for the statue and obtained by NPR allowed it to remain there until Sunday evening, eyewitness video showed U.S. Park Police hauling it onto a truck before sunrise on Wednesday. They got a permit. What's the problem? The problem is I hate it. A spokesman for the Department of the Interior told NPR that the statue was removed because it was not compliant with the permit issued, though it did not specify how. The Secret Handshake is accusing the Trump administration, correctly, of illegally moving the statue as part of its crackdown on speech that it disagrees with on the heels of ABC's temporary suspension of Jimmy Kimmel's late night show under pressure from the FCC. Just sort of putting it out there. By the way, it's not the first such installation from Secret Handshake. They've done some others. And prior to this, I can't remember exactly what the other ones were, but they may ring a bell with you if they mention what they are down here. I'll scroll down and see if they say it. But they let them go. They got their permit. They were insulting to the administration. They just let them sit there. But I guess the Epstein thing is a bridge too far. Here's the section I'm looking for. The Friendship statue is one of several anti-Trump sculptures to materialize in the heart of D.C. In the past year. The Secret Handshake told NPR it's responsible for almost all of them and never had trouble getting permits for any of them. The first was on the National Mall in October, just ahead of the 2024 election, before he was in charge. It was a bronze replica of former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's desk, topped with her nameplate, a landline phone, Post-it notes, file folders, and a perfectly swirled pile of feces, a la a poop emoji. The statue, titled The Resolute Desk, bore a plaque honoring the brave men and women who broke into the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021 to loot, urinate, and defecate throughout these hallowed halls in order to overturn an election. The installation made such a splash that the group extended its permit an extra week through the day after the election. And we don't mean a splash in the toilet, but whatever. Gross. A few days after the desk landed on the mall, another bronze statue of a fist clutching a tiki torch made its debut in Freedom Plaza, just blocks from the White House, titled The Donald J. Trump Enduring Flame. Its imagery and plaque reference the 2017 Unite the Right white nationalist rally and Trump's reaction to it. This monument pays tribute to President Donald Trump and the very fine people he boldly stood to defend when they marched in Charlottesville, Virginia, it read. Two more satirical statues popped up in a similar spot on a national mall this June. One showed a giant golden thumbs up, crushing the Statue of Liberty's crown and head. On its pedestal were the words "Dictator approved" and quotes from various authoritarian world leaders praising Trump: Russia's Vladimir Putin, Hungary's Viktor Orban, North Korea's Kim Jong-un, and Brazil's former president, now in prison, I guess, Jair Bolsonaro. The following week, the statue was replaced with one of a golden bald eagle perched on a gilded television set, which played a continuous loop of Trump dancing. That's fun. The pedestal beneath it quoted the White House's response to the previous week's statue. In the United States of America, you have the freedom to display your so-called art no matter how ugly it is, it reads. Earlier this month, the Federal Reserve's interest rate meeting, during it, a golden-hued statue of Trump holding up a giant Bitcoin appeared on the mall for a single day. This was not the work of the Secret Handshake, the group says. A collective of cryptocurrency investors took credit for that statue, saying it was designed to prompt conversation about the future of government-issued currency and reflection on cryptocurrency's growing influence. And I'm not sure whether that's supposed to be pro-crypto or pro-Trump or anti or what. But there you have it. All right. Well, they're not putting up with that anymore, permit or no permit. So, again, something to note as we move on. Let's see. You already know this story, so maybe it's not the best use of our time, but something from the Independent in the UK on Trump's claims that he ended some wars which are imaginary, and giving, I guess, the provenance of how he came to blurt this out. It is said to have just been a slip of the tongue, and it may very well be. But, too many slips of the tongue, countries he doesn't remember the name of or have any awareness of. But this is the story behind his claim to have ended the war, which didn't exist, between, I think, Armenia and Cambodia. All right. So if you were looking for, well, how did he get to that? I think the idea here was there was war type tensions, military tensions between Cambodia and another of its neighbors, and I think it was Laos, perhaps. And there was also tension between other countries in completely different places that were having border disputes. Armenia had one, but he was really thinking of Azerbaijan, but something, and he switched and swapped. And in no case were any of the A countries that he confused, Armenia, Albania, Azerbaijan, depending on the date, in any way related to what was going on in Cambodia. Cambodia had a border conflict. Some other countries had border conflicts. Because he's a mush brain, he confused border conflict with border conflict. And then, of course, claimed to have settled that war, which nobody else could have done except, relatively routine tensions. Sad that they erupted into shooting, but these things do happen around the world all the time, and sometimes they just fizzle with or without Trump intervening. But in some cases, Trump actually does do something. Now, what he does, I don't know, but he does pick up a phone. There are records of him talking to people about those conflicts, and then those conflicts coming to an end, whether he's calling them and saying, if you buy Bitcoin, I'll fund your war, and they decline to buy the Bitcoin, so the war fizzles. That's ending a war. It's not Nobel Peace Prize worthy, but who knows? The point is, he's sticking his nose in places, and in some cases, actually, there are people who say, that helped. Thank you. We realized, oh my God, the world is paying attention to us because of something Donald Trump has said about us. Our best interest is to end this war before he does something dumb and makes it worse. It could be that. It could be real constructive help. I don't believe it, but it could be. You might want to review this just to stay up to date, I guess. I will too. All right. One more thing we'll try and squeeze in here. Ed Martin, horrible, awful person. Remember, too crazy for even the Republican Congress to approve as U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. So crazy was he that A, the Republicans in Congress rejected him, and B, did do A, right? B, they replaced him with Jeanine Pirro, who is likewise too crazy to be confirmed as U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. But I guess the Republicans couldn't stand the idea of handing Trump 2 defeats in a row on this. Maybe they worried that he might kill them for it. I don't know. Maybe they just thought it's bad for the party to put up 2 lunatics and to have to report in the newspaper that twice in a row he's nominated idiots too dumb to serve. So this one, though too dumb to serve, we're just going to have to take it and be done with it. And then people won't write stories about how he was dumb twice in a row, only one time in a row. Anyway, Ed Martin, too crazy for that job. But the thing is, he got another one, right? He got appointed to a position that didn't require Senate approval. The point here is Donald Trump will not stop, just cannot stop giving crazy-ass Ed Martin jobs in the Justice Department. So the last we, I think, talked about Ed Martin, he had showed up in a trench coat in the middle of summer outside of Letitia James's house in New York to try to further the effort to indict her for mortgage fraud based on Bill Pulte's bogus information. They end up trying to indict her for having bought a house in Virginia, but he was there to try to see whether he could indict her for buying her primary residence in New York as well. That apparently hasn't gone anywhere, but, that's what he was busy doing, creeping outside of her house in a trench coat, the traditional garb of a flasher. Just saying that that's the case. Well, anyway, he's back in the news because he's a disgusting asshole. Thank you. Why? Because he's Ed Martin. I don't know why that happened, but what's the story here? Again, another instance in which Ed Martin proves himself such a crazy asshole that even Trump administration officials are forced to say, this guy's too much of a crazy asshole for us. We got to do something about it. In one case, it was, no, we can't be the U.S. attorney for D.C. Now it's this. CNN reports just the other day, Caitlin Collins, Hannah Rabinowitz, Caitlin Polance, it's a Caitlin delegation. Trump DOJ, you know those guys, retracts a letter that implied what? Can you believe it? The DOJ issued a letter that implied that the Sandy Hook FBI agent investigating Sandy Hook was under investigation himself because, of course, you know how it is with people with Hitler mustaches these days. The Sandy Hook is a false flag operation. Everywhere there was crisis actors. And the FBI that investigated the actual shooting, you're investigating the wrong thing. You should be investigating the false flag operation. So just like January 6th, Trump's DOJ, Trump's FBI is investigating the investigators, right? If you investigated what happened on January 6th, duh, it was patriotism, stop investigating. If you're investigating Sandy Hook, duh, stop investigating, it was a false flag and these are crisis actors. Apparently a step too far even for Trump's DOJ. And would it shock you to know that it was Ed freaking Martin who sent this letter? What is this person doing in government? This man belongs in a mental institution. You cannot keep giving him jobs in the Department of Justice. Even Pam Bondi has had enough. Even Todd Blanche, who's taking care to arrange what you think is going to be the end of your Jeffrey Epstein encounter, says this is too much. A top Justice Department official has retracted a letter he sent to an FBI agent who responded to the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre. That letter suggested the agent was being investigated in relation to a defamation lawsuit against Alex Hitler Jones. He's now literally running around in a Hitler mustache, and Ed Martin is on his side. In a letter to William Oldenburg's attorney last week, President Donald Trump's ally, Ed Martin, implied, by the way, just note that the CNN writers went out of the way to put that in there. I mean, it's true, but they easily could have left that out. And they might even have been asked by their editors to take it out. I don't know, but it's in there. They identify Ed Martin as President Donald Trump ally Ed Martin, implied the agent was being scrutinized because of his role in a major lawsuit led by families of victims who were right and who won, that resulted in a $1.4 billion judgment against the conspiracy theorist Jones. And by the way, why the effing F is Alex Jones still like a figure? He's $1.4 billion in debt to these families. He's paying none of it. Whatever happened to selling off all his assets and selling off of his even the microphone he uses to run around and say this dumb stuff? Oldenburg, who was one of the first responders the day of the 2012 elementary school massacre, and I can't imagine any more trauma ever being visited on anyone, he was a plaintiff in the lawsuit. As it turns out, he and the families testified that they all faced years of harassment and threats from those who believed Jones's lies that the shooting, which killed 20 first graders and 6 adults, was a hoax. Martin initially told Oldenburg's attorney that he had questions about the agent benefiting financially from the lawsuit. Well, it was a lawsuit, and ominously warned that, quote, there are criminal laws protecting the citizens from actions by government employees who may be acting for personal benefit. Well, maybe you should enforce them against this administration. But no, that's not what Martin's going to do. I encourage you to review those, Martin wrote, according to a copy of the letter that Alex Jones posted on X. He let that slip to Alex. But in a new letter addressed to attorney Christopher Matte, I don't remember how he pronounces his name, but maybe I never knew. Mattei is the lawyer for, I think, some of the families as well, but also for Oldenburg. In a letter to this attorney on Wednesday, Martin withdrew his initial letter entirely. I mean, does that make up for it? No. Is it good? I'm glad somebody made him do it. Yes. but they should have, tied him to an anchor and thrown him overboard at Osama bin Laden's grave. But, don't say that because that's left-wing violence. Anyway, in a brief note, CNN reported, Martin, this should have been a long apology letter, but instead it was a brief note. He wrote that there is no investigation of Oldenburg and, quote, because of this, I hereby withdraw my request for information from you or your former client. This letter was not just a threat that you would be under investigation, but that the investigation has in fact started, that he's conducting it, and you owe me this information. Don't make me subpoena you, bro. Wow. He's wildly out of control and crazy as hell and still working for the DOJ. Martin was ordered by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche to retract that letter, according to a person familiar with the matter. One of the few good things I've ever heard associated with Todd Blanche. Mattei, the guy's attorney, said he's pleased that this so-called inquiry has ended. And that, I guess, is at least good news. But we don't know. I mean, we don't know. There's another crazy-ass thing coming down the pike. Ed Martin's not fired. But okay, he had to retract his letter. Less than 18 hours after calling out Alex Jones and Ed Martin for their corrupt use of the Department of Justice to harass Sandy Hook families and the heroic FBI agent who ran into that school to save any children he could, I am happy to learn that this so-called inquiry has now been withdrawn, if it ever existed at all. Mattei said in a statement, "Let this be a reminder. This is not a moment to cower in silence, but to stand up to bullying, lawless conduct. This isn't over, and it shouldn't be. Martin really deserves to get it with both barrels. Metaphorically, legally speaking, throw the book at him, but only gently. Toss it in his direction, because we don't want to hurt anybody with the book. But, this really does need to be settled once and for all. Martin has got to go. It's insane what he's allowed to do to people. I mean, really, something needs more widespread attention. I know, and it's very hard to break through at this point, but all of America kind of needs to know. Ed Martin is threatening FBI agents who responded to the Sandy Hook shooting by running into the building to try to save children. I don't know whether that's an accurate recounting of what happened. I don't remember that being discussed, but if it's anything close to true, even if it's not, honestly, anybody who went into that building to clean up and investigate is a hero at this point. The trauma they had to endure, seeing what was left behind. Ed Martin is a full-blown Alex Jones idiot. I'm censoring myself, but he's absolutely insane. He's very, very dangerous. Not because he's an evil plotter, but because he's crazy and he thinks he can use the Justice Department as a personal tool to do Alex Jones level conspiracy theory prosecutions. He's got to go. He needs to be locked up for his own good. I don't know if he's got any kids, but somebody needs to do a wellness check on Ed Martin, and he needs to fail the wellness check. Anyway, at least the lawyer says it's not over. It's almost over. The show is almost over. I'm going to have to give you the rest of this and then run. After Trump took office, Martin was initially set up to be the top U.S. attorney in Washington. But after failing to secure confirmation because the Senate torpedoed his nomination, gee, why would they do that? He was instead given multiple roles for his multiple personality disorder, I guess, inside the Justice Department. He now serves as the director of the department's, quote, weaponization working group. What's the craziest effing thing we can give this crazy effing lunatic? How about this? The original September 15th letter from Martin. This is now he's doing. This is not an old letter. September 15th, 2025, or as the Christians would say, the year of our Lord, 2025, or the year 5786, however you want to put it. But September 15th would have been 5785. But this is a current letter. September 15th, from Martin, disclosed by Jones, of course, on social media, of course, was met with derision from the families and the FBI agent. Thanks to the courage of the Sandy Hook families, InfoWars will soon be finished, you would think. It's supposed to be the case already. Mattei, the attorney for Oldenburg, I'm sorry about the name, Oldenburg and the family, said in a statement responding to the original letter, in his last gasps, Jones is once again harassing them from behind a Hitler mustache, by the way. Only now with the corrupt complicity of at least one DOJ official. It's as disgusting as it is pathetic, and we will not stand for it. Jones posted the letter on X. The letter does not make any specific allegation or charge behind the investigation because they don't do charges or allegations or evidence at DOJ anymore. Martin has not responded to CNN's request for comment. I am writing to request information from you regarding your client, FBI Special Agent William Oldenburg, and his role in certain litigation that may benefit him personally and that may impact our citizens and our legal system, the letter to Oldenburg's attorney says. As you may know, there are criminal laws protecting the citizens from actions by government employees who may be acting for personal benefit. I think he's violating those right now. I encourage you to review those. Since he joined the Justice Department early in Trump's second term, Martin has sent several similar letters threatening legal actions against the president's perceived enemies or organizations that run counter to his agenda, many of which have been leaked to the public. In his letter to Mitt, Martin requested that he, quote, keep this correspondence confidential. Alex Jones posts it. Keep it confidential. Oops, I'm very late in getting out of here. Because I do not wish to litigate this in the media. Oh well. Nevertheless, Jones posted the letter on X claiming that the DOJ's task force on government weaponization against the American people has launched an investigation into the Democrat Party / FBI directing illegal lawfare against Alex Jones and InfoWars. And earlier this month, before the letter was sent, Jones posted a picture of Martin and himself on social media with the caption, I just had a very important meeting, with a DOJ strike force leader, Ed Martin. And this week, Jones, on his online show, which shouldn't even exist, said a bunch of other actions are being taken right now. They're going to be breaking very soon. They're going to be breaking the law is what he meant. What is he even doing out of prison at this point? I don't know. He's $1.4 billion in hock. When are they going to take away his assets? Please get to it. And while you're at it, lock up Ed Martin. For his own good, he's a danger to the public at large and probably to himself. He is insane, and Donald Trump will not stop empowering him. Somebody's got to put a stop to this. I don't know who. I don't know how. Anyway, enjoy your weekend. That, among many other things, I'm going to do my best to give Scott the list of things for you to read and review over the weekend, and then we'll see what happens rolling into this weekend. And I guess next week we'll talk about government shutdown and maybe the end of the United States military as we know it. We'll see.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Much more to talk about, and that means Justice Putnam gets his turn at it next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's on top of his list? The MAGA National Archives. Oh, this is a huge story. Illegally released the entire unredacted military file of one Mikey Sherrill to her three-time loser MAGA opponent for New Jersey governor, who then shopped it to the press when told not to. Stay tuned. We'll see you next week.